I'll go back now to 1949. I was in Milwaukee, and I gave a series of lectures on the Bible. And this couple, he was a physicist, the head physicist of Alice Chalmers. They're a huge, big manufacturing firm making these turbines, sometimes bigger than this interior. And he was the head of the chemical department, where they would send water from all over the world who bought the turbine. And he would analyze the water to discover the problem that they faced, because the water, as it came through the stream, gathered the chemicals, and then the chemicals deposited itself within the turbine. And so they would send him samples of the water. And then he would analyze the water and then send them the solution to their problem. Well, being a trained chemist and the head of the department, he didn't take issue with me, but he said, Neville, I can't quite go along with you, because as a chemist, it's in conflict with my training. You tell me that you can go forward in time, that you can move backwards in time, that all things are, and everything is now, at this very moment. And yet you're telling me you can make things change, and it's in conflict with my training. We have a law known, said he, and we call it entropy. And entropy means that the past is fixed and unalterable. You cannot change it. If that could be changed, it throws everything out of kilter in my lab. I must know the past is unalterable, like braiding a lady's hair. And the braided part, that's fixed. The rest is future, not yet braided. We are waiting to see how it will develop from the braided part, because that is completely fixed and unalterable. And you tell me it is not, that the whole vast world exists now, past, present, and future, and that you can go into these sections of time in a world that is finished. But I can't go along with that. That's perfectly all right. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a scientist, so I cannot argue the point with you. I only know my visions. And I teach vision as I have actually experienced it. And I can go into these spots. I have gone into these places, and the past has not passed away. And it's fixed, as you say, but I'm quite sure one could go back and revise that past and change it. And I can go forward into the future that I do know and set it up to walk across a bridge of incident. When I come to that point in time where I have entered, it takes on the color and the tone and the reality that I assumed it to be when I entered that state. Can't be done. But he was a very honest man, as most of these fellows are. They're trained to be honest. How else could they achieve what they do achieve in science unless they're perfectly honest with themselves? Well, in the month of November, I received a letter from him. And he sent me the Science News letter dated October the 15th. And it was all about the positron. And the one who wrote it was Professor Richard Feynman. He was then professor of physics at Cornell University. 20 years later, only last year, they granted him the Nobel Prize in Physics for that paper. It took them 20 years to recognize what he said as theory back in 1949. And if I can quote it, this is it. The positron is a wrong-way electron. It's wrong way in every sense of the word. It moves backwards in time. It moves from where it hasn't been and speeds to where it was an instant ago. Arriving there, it is bunked so hard, its time sense is reversed and it moves back to where it hasn't been. Now that is not Neville speaking. That is Professor Feynman. For that he got the Nobel Prize last year. He said it's not only backwards in that sense, but even its charge is backwards. It's a positron. It's positive and not negative. And yet it is an electron. When they first observed it, or rather had it as theory, They did not want to admit it, but yet it fitted in with Einstein's theory, mathematically. So they had to in some way accept it, but no one had ever photographed it. Then came someone who photographed it in their studies of the cosmic rays. And here it was the actual positron. It seemed as though two were developed at a certain point. And it wasn't, said he, that one coming back, which was the positron, should, if it is bounced, it should be deflected and continue on its course, but deflected course. On the other hand, if it's bounced so hard, it's not deflected, it's reversed and moves forward in a normal manner to where it hasn't been. Well, when he sent me this, he wrote a sweet, lovely letter saying, Neville, I must confess, I didn't see it. No one saw it until Professor Feynman in his lab discovered this. But he discovered it by theory. And you tell me you know it by vision. You're not a scientist, and yet all that you said to me, which I could not believe, and even in this moment it's difficult for me to believe, here comes a great professor, a theoretical physicist, and he is the one who wrote this paper. For that he got the Nobel Prize last year. He worked on our atomic bomb. He worked on the hydrogen bomb. Then he asked the government to relieve him of the secrecy imposed upon him because of his position. And he came here to Caltech and taught at Caltech theoretical physics. He said, I want the freedom of imagination. I didn't want to be confined with the secrets of government so that I could not express myself. Leave me alone, all in theory. So he goes blindly on with his mathematics and his theory, bringing out these concepts, all theory. Well, mine is not theory. I go into these states